Hello students and a very welcome back on this channel yet again. कैसे हैं आप सभी? I hope you all are doing great, and this video is going to be an important one because here in this video I will be discussing the most important questions and frequently asked questions of one of the most important, compulsory and a bit tricky paper, that is IGNOU MEG 05. Yes, that is Literary Criticism and Theory paper. So this particular paper is an important paper and it is also the compulsory paper for all the MA English literature students who are pursuing this course from IGNOU University. So as you can see on your screen, I have prepared a list of most important short notes that have been asked in the previous year question papers of IGNOU final examination. So let us take a look that what kind of short notes have been repeated and what are the most important short notes that has been asked in the examination. So the first short note is rasa. So this particular short note has been taken from block 1. This is also one of the most and the very important short note because this has been asked multiple times by IGNOU in the question paper. Also, the next set of short note is dhwani. So dhwani is also one of the most important short note that has been frequently asked. And the third one, that is sphota. So all these three short notes have been taken from block 1, and all these three short notes, the first three short notes, have been most frequently asked, and these are the most important ones that have been multiply asked by IGNOU in the final examination. Now next set of short note is hamartia, ethos, mythos. So that is from the second block, that is classical criticism. Hamartia has been taken from the Aristotle, the unit considering Aristotle, and ethos, mythos. These are the 6 elements of tragedy that has been given by Aristotle. Then next is, of lately in the previous year papers, one can also witness this particular short note, that is Orientalism. Though Orientalism is a very broad word and it also has a very wider scope. So in this particular short note, we can only mention and write down the few important points and few important features that Edward Said has actually proposed in his theory of Orientalism in his essay. And the next is also the second sex. So this is also an important text by Simone de Beauvoir. So this is taken from the Feminist Criticism block. So this is also one of the most important, that of lately this has been seen in many of the previous year papers. Similarly, the death of the author. So this is also a most important essay by Roland Barthes. So we can just write the gist and the most important points, the important crux of this particular essay if it comes in the short note. Mostly this particular short note is also seen as a long question, that is a 20 marker question. So all in all, this particular topic, that is the death of the author, that is an essay by Roland Barthes, is important to prepare for the examination. Now moving on to the next one, that is literary theory. Sometimes it is also asked, most of the times it is not asked. So obviously we have to do it because literary theory, we are studying this particular paper, so we should know that what is literary theory and what is the main features of literary theory in particular. Next is about postmodernism. So postmodernism is the last block of this particular paper. This is also one of the most important and one of the most crucial short notes. So we need to write the definition of postmodernism. We need to categorize that how postmodernism is different from modernism and what are the features of postmodernism as such. Then moving on is objective correlative, catharsis, Aushitya, superstructure, base. So base and superstructure very very important because this comes either for the short notes or it comes for a 20-mark long question. So this is also one of the very very important and very very crucial short notes that one has to prepare for the examination. Then there is poetic diction, alamkara, gynocriticism, the concept of signifier and signified, mimesis, irony, shruti, deconstruction, structuralism, and fancy and imagination. So all these short notes have been taken from different blocks. So these are, as you can see in the video, that if you do only these short notes, then you have prepared quite well for the examination because these are the most important ones and one of the most frequently asked short notes that I have prepared a list of by analyzing the previous year question papers of MEG 03 paper, that is literary criticism and theory. So even if you do all these topics and all these subtopics in particular, if you prepare these very thoroughly and very very uh, uh, you devote a lot of time to it and you devote a lot of focus to it, then almost at least one or two you will be able to see in your examination that IGNOU will be taking in a couple of days. So now moving on to the long questions. So there are many long questions. I have prepared a list of long questions block wise. So as you can see from block 2, these are the particular questions that one really needs to devote time to. So the first one is, what is the reason for Plato's hostility towards art? Explain. So block 2 is basically a literary theory. Block 2 is basically about a classical criticism. That is, we focus on the theories of Plato and Aristotle. So while preparing for IGNOU MEG 05 examination, it is a suggestion that one needs to prepare both of these topics, that is this particular block, that is block 2, literary classical literary criticism concerning Plato and Aristotle, that please prepare this block very thoroughly because this is also one of the most interesting blocks of the entire paper and it is also very easy and simple to understand. Once you understand the concepts, it is very very easy to handle. So you can see the questions, even the difficulty of the questions are not so high from this particular block. If you know the concepts, if you know what are the views of Plato towards art, why he was hostile towards art, what are the set of arguments that he has given against art and in poetry in particular and poets, and how he has um, justified his arguments that he is actually writing, uh, is something that one needs to focus on. So now next set of question is, explain how Plato views art as twice removed from reality. So this is also one of the most important question and a frequently asked question that has been multiply asked in the examination. So here we have to basically give all the views, all the set of arguments that Plato has given, because Plato's theory of mimesis, his views on imitation and art. So all those 5 arguments we have to list in this particular question. Next is, how does Aristotle meet Plato's criticism of poets. So here we have to compare and contrast the criticism of Aristotle and Plato's criticism of poets. So basically, this in this particular answer, we have to compare and contrast the contrasting views of these both of these both writers, that is Aristotle and Plato. Now, next one is comment on Plato's views on poetry. So this is also kind of a repetitive question as stated above. Now compare and contrast in your own words Plato and Aristotle as literary theorists. So this is also a very direct question that is also multiply asked in the paper. Now next is explain in your own words Aristotle theory of mimesis. Very, very important. You can mark this particular question as important because many times either Plato's views on imitation and art is asked, and multiple times Aristotle theory of mimesis is focused upon. So these two questions are particularly very, very important. Now discuss mimesis in the light of Plato and Aristotle's postulations. Same as above. Enumerate the 6 elements of tragedy according to Aristotle and explain any two of them with suitable examples. So, here in this question, we not only have to state the 6 elements, but at the same time, we are required to explain any two of the given set of 6 elements with suitable examples. We can give any of the elements. We can talk about the character, we can talk about the thought, plot, song, spectacle, diction. So all these are the 6 elements of tragedy, and we can give a set of suitable examples of any two. The last important question is discuss Aristotle's view of the plot in tragedy. So Aristotle considered plot as the soul of tragedy. So basically, in this particular question, we have to state that how Aristotle viewed plot as supreme in his tragedy. And what are the two kinds of plot, that is simple plot, complex plot, all those things we have to cater in this particular question. Now, quickly moving on to block 3, that is romantic criticism. Very, very important block, cannot be escaped and should not be escaped as per my suggestion. So critically examine Wordsworth's view that all good poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So this is the particular definition that Wordsworth has given in his preface to the Lyrical Ballads, which has actually started. So the publication of Lyrical Ballads have actually laid down the foundation, or has laid down the beginning of the romantic criticism in particular, or romanticism in particular. So we have to examine this particular statement from that perspective actually. So we need to cater to all the words, we need to mention. So this is also a direct question because it's simply given in the study IGNOU study material as well. Now, quickly moving on to the next one, that is briefly outline Wordsworth's theory of poetic diction with special reference to the preface to the Lyrical Ballads. So here we have to talk about the poetic diction, that what were the views of Wordsworth regarding poetic diction. So we know, if we have read Wordsworth's preface to the Lyrical Ballads, we know that he had controversial views regarding the poetic diction, and how his views have been criticized and commented upon by many of the other critics, and especially by S.T. Coleridge in Biographia Literaria. So all those things we can mention in this particular question. But specifically, we have to define the poetic diction and what was actually the theory of Wordsworth regarding poetic diction in particular. Next is romantics assert that imagination transcends reason. Discuss. So this is basically a very important uh, question from this particular block, that is romantic criticism, because here we have to discuss this particular statement in reference to romantics and romanticism in particular. Now, next is, what does Wordsworth think of the distinction between the language of prose and metrical composition? So, here also we need to talk about Wordsworth's views regarding language of prose and metrical composition. Now, next is, what role does Shelley assign to poets in the 19th century? Explain. So, we know that in the literary criticism block, we also have an essay by P.B. Shelley, that is Defense of Poetry, wherein he is defending his his friend and contemporary Thomas Love Peacock for his contrasting views regarding poets and poetry in particular. So, how he's justifying the status and the position of poets in the 19th century, all those things and all those important points we need to mention in this particular answer. Now, next is, evaluate Wordsworth's preface to the lyrical ballads as an attack on the inane phraseology of many 18th century writers. So, here we have to evaluate this particular work by Wordsworth as an attack. So, we have to basically talk about preface to the lyrical ballads in particular, that what are the arguments that Wordsworth has stated in his preface. So this particular block, I have actually mentioned all of the questions, so that is why it is a bit lengthy. But anyways, all these questions are very, very important, and you must have a look at least to all of these questions. Now, next one is, present in your own words the romantic theory of knowledge. This is a very direct question, and it is there in the study material as well. Elaborate the basic distinction between fancy and imagination as brought out by Coleridge in Biographia Literaria. Very, very, very important question, because Coleridge's Biographia Literaria is itself one of the most important works of romantic criticism in particular, and his theory of fancy and imagination is one of the most important of all of his theories that he has actually postulated. So, very important question. Discuss Coleridge's theory of imagination. It's basically a repetition. I've stated it again because to make you aware that how this question is asked. It can be directly asked, or it can be, you know, it can also be asked in multiple frameworks. Now, evaluate P.B. Shelley as a romantic critic. So, we can take a reference from his essay, that is A Defense of Poetry, and we can write about P.B. Shelley in particular. Now, discuss the romantic theory of art. So, here we have to talk about romantic theory of art in particular. This is also one of the direct questions. Then compare the theories of imagination as presented by Shelley and Coleridge. So, we have to talk about the views of both Shelley and Coleridge, that what are the views of both of them of imagination, that how they perceived imagination to be. Now, the last of this particular block is, consider Wordsworth's preface to the lyrical ballads as the manifesto of romantic literature. This is also one of the most important questions that has been asked in the paper a lot of times. Now, moving on to the next block, that is block 4, that is about new criticism. So, this is also one of the lengthiest blocks that we have in this particular paper. So, the question here is, what are the common features of the critics associated with new criticism? So, very simple question, we just have to state the features of new criticism. Now, next is briefly explain the intentional fallacy and the effective fallacy. Very important, because this is also asked in the short note questions as well. Now, assess two of the seminal critical concepts formulated by T.S. Eliot. So, T.S. Eliot is one of the most important new critic, and in this particular block, if you're doing and if you're attempting this particular block in your paper, then it is recommended that you do T.S. Eliot very, very well, because most of the questions are asked from this particular topic and from T.S. Eliot works. Now, new criticism emphasizes the text and not the background comment. So we have to justify this statement basically, that new criticism basically focuses on the text and not the background. So this is one of the most important feature of new criticism, and we have to elaborate on this particular feature in this particular question. Now next is, what does T.S. Eliot mean by the dissociation of sensibility? Very, very important. It is basically one of the most important concepts that has been given by T.S. Eliot, and we have to state that what does he mean by this particular statement that he has given. What, according to John Crowley Ransom, is the role of the literary critic in the modern world? Explain. So what was his role? That is something which we have to state in this particular question. Discuss the ideas expressed by Kenneth Brooks in his essay Irony as a Principle of Structure. This is also one of an important questions. You can see this particular question in 2 or 3 previous year question papers as well. Now next is, evaluate I.A. Richards' contribution to literary criticism. This is also an important one. I would suggest that if you are attempting this particular block, if you are attempting a question from this particular block, then you also prepare I.A. Richards and the works that he has actually done, apart from T.S. Eliot as well. What, according to John Crowley Ransom, are the duties of a critic? Explain. So all those things that he has actually stated, we have to explain in this particular answer or question. Now next is, the truth which the poet utters according to Kenneth Brooks can be approached only in terms of a paradox. Do you agree? Supply reasons for your answer. We need to justify the statements, whether we agree with it or not, and we have to also state the reasons regarding the same. Now comment briefly on any 4 obstacles to proper response that I.A. Richards catalogues in Practical Criticism. So again, from this particular block, I.A. Richards, so any 4 obstacles that he has stated, we have to write in this particular answer. Evaluate Kenneth Brooks as a new critic. Very straightforward and a simple question for that matter. Next one is, how does the new criticism make use of the model of practical criticism initiated by I.A. Richards? So we have to talk about firstly the new criticism and how I.A. Richards has actually, how the new criticism makes use of this model of practical criticism. So all these things we have to state in this particular answer. Now next one is Marxism, an important block of this particular paper, that is literary criticism and theory. That is block number 5. So you can see that these are the questions that have been asked in this particular, that has been actually frequently asked, that is, assess the impact of Marxism on subsequent literary critical theories of the 19th century. Very direct and simple and straightforward questions. We have to talk about Marxism and what are the impacts that Marxism has in the theories of the 20th century. Simple. Next is, how do Marx and Engels interpret literature? Very important questions. It has been asked from this particular topic and it has been asked from this block multiple times. We have to basically specify that how do Marx and Engels interpreted literature specifically. Now next is, critically appraise the ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels about class relations and class ideology. very simple and straightforward. If we know the concept, if you have understood the concept of Marxism, if you have gone through the ideas of Marx and Engels in particular regarding the class, that how Marxism focuses on class relations and class ideology, we will be able to attempt this particular answer very well in our paper. Now next is, how does literature represent the social conditions and social structure? This is also one of the most direct questions. Now next is, explain Marx's idea of dialectical materialism. How does it help us in understanding literature? This is also a direct question, straightforward question. It is there in our blog. It is there in our study material, that is IGNOU study material. We can take reference and we can prepare this particular question from there. Now next is, writers are unable to see that the truth about their societies because they are caught up in the false consciousness of ideology. Examine the statement in context of the Marxist view of literature. So we have to explain and examine this particular statement. Explain how Marxism is opposed to both idealism and mechanical materialism. Simple, straightforward question. It is a subtopic of our Marxist theory and criticism block. Next is, explain with the help of suitable examples the Marxian concept of base and superstructure. Of lately, this particular question is one of the most favorite questions of IGNOU, because it has been seen multiple times either in the short notes or in the 20 marker question. Attempt a short essay on relation between literature and ideology. So we need to write an essay stating the relationship between literature and ideology. Next is, write a short essay showing how Marxism has influenced many critics in the 20th century. Illustrate your answers with suitable examples. So we need to write, so this is a bit lengthier question because we have to write actually an essay, though a short essay, but we have to elaborate that what is Marxism, how Marxism has impacted and influenced several critics, and we have to also support this particular answer with suitable examples. So a bit lengthier question, so to say. Now next is about block 6, that is feminist criticism. This is also one of the most important and a kind of a easier and a simpler block of this particular paper. So let us see that what are the questions that have been asked. First question is, discuss Elaine Walter's feminist concerns in literature. Mark this question as very important because this has been asked multiple times in our paper. Next is, discuss the major concerns of feminist theory. This looks simple, but here we have to basically justify and basically we have to write all the major concerns of feminist theory. That means the works of most or almost all the feminist writers that is prescribed at least in our course, if not outside the course. Now next is, from the tyranny of man, the greater number of female follies proceed. In the light of this statement, evaluate Mary Wollstonecraft's thoughts on women. So Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of Rights of the Women is one of the most important and crucial texts in the entire feminist literary criticism. Because Mary Wollstonecraft has been considered as the world's first feminist writer and intellectual, and she's also regarded as a mother of feminism by many of the literary critics and scholars. So her text becomes a very crucial one. So in this particular block, it is suggested that do not leave anything related to Mary Wollstonecraft and Elaine Walter in particular, because these two authors, these two writers, mostly the questions from this particular block, that is block 6, are asked from their works. Now next is, comment on the significance of the title The Second Sex. So The Second Sex is one of the most important works by Simone de Beauvoir, the French writer, female writer and literary critic and novelist. and we need to write the importance of this particular title. That is one of the most important works of Simone de Beauvoir. Next is again Mary Wollstonecraft, that is assess Mary Wollstonecraft's contribution to women's rights and their education. Very important question from this particular block. Next is evaluate Elaine Walter's gynocriticism and its value in the context of feminist criticism. Very, very important. The concept of gynocriticism. It can either come in your short notes or as a longer or a lengthier question. That is a 20 marks question. Now next is in placing women as the other of man. Simone de Beauvoir critically examines the issue of alterity in the context of women's identity. Substantiate your answer with reference to Beauvoir's The Second Sex. A lengthy question, but an important question, because we have to substantiate this particular statement and with reference to The Second Sex, an important work by Beauvoir. Next is evaluate Virginia Woolf as a feminist critic. Now we can talk about Virginia Woolf, how she has contributed in feminist literary criticism in particular. We can also talk about her essay, that is a room of one's own. And now next one is explain the term gynocritic and give 2 examples. So this is also a repetitive question. So we can move on to the next one. Draw out the ideologies set forth by Mary Wollstonecraft and Virginia Woolf as pioneer feminists. So a bit lengthier question, because we have to state the ideologies and the contribution of both these well-known and prominent writers as pioneer feminists. So a lengthy question. Next is examine Virginia Woolf's attitude to the canon, that is ancestors in women's writing. A kind of important question that we have to state, that how Virginia Woolf's, that what was her attitude to the canon, that is ancestors in women's writing. So we have to talk about the thoughts and ideas of Virginia Woolf in women's writing in particular. Now coming to block number 7, that is deconstruction. So let us look at what are the questions that has been asked from this particular block. That is, how is deconstructive reading of a poem different from a structuralist reading of it? Mark this question as important, because here we have to state the differences of deconstructive reading and structuralist readings. So we need to specify the factors, the differentiating factors of all these. Now next is what is meant by the death of the author in critical theory. So an important essay by Roland Barthes. So we need to explain the arguments that he has stated in this particular essay. Now attempt a critical evaluation of the theory of structuralism. So here we need to talk about the theory of structuralism that has been given by Ferdinand de Saussure, the Swiss linguist. Next is discuss the strengths and limitations of deconstruction as a method of critical inquiry. So here we have to talk about 2 things, that is strengths and limitations of deconstruction as a method of critical inquiry. Now next one is present a deconstructive analysis of John Donne's The Canonization. So John Donne is a metaphysical poet. He is one of the most prominent metaphysical poets that has been that is known to us, the 17th century metaphysical poet. So his most famous poem, that is The Canonization, we have to attempt a deconstructive analysis of it. So it is also given in our IGNOU study material. Now next is what is the process of deconstructing a text. So we need to justify the process, we need to state the process of deconstructing a text, that what are the things that one has to take care of, what is the process of deconstruction in particular. Now next is examine the approaches of structuralism and deconstruction to the theory of sign system. So basically we need to examine both structuralism and deconstruction theory in particular. Next is explain the concept of structure and discuss the notion of a stable center. An important question. So because this particular paper is about deconstruction, so it becomes an important concept. That is, what is the concept of structure and what is the notion of a stable center. Now next is, what is deconstruction? Very basic and very straightforward question. Is deconstruction an effective tool for analyzing a literary text? Give a reasoned answer. Very straightforward question this is. Now next is comment on the implications of the death of the author by Roland Barthes. So here we need to talk about the death of the author. We need to justify the set of arguments and the statements that Roland Barthes have actually stated in this particular essay, as well as we need to comment on the implications that he has actually laid down in this particular essay. Now next is, what according to Barthes is the difference between work and text. So work and text is also one of an important essay by Roland Barthes, though it's a bit complex and a tricky one, but this is also a straightforward question. It is also given in the IGNOU study material. We need to differentiate between work and text in particular. Now the last and the final block is block number 8. Now these are the set of questions that you can see on your screen. First is, analyze the historical importance of post-colonialism for the third world. Post-colonialism, if you are attempting any question from this particular block, then post-colonialism is one of the important subtopic that one must prepare for your exam. So here we have to talk about the historical importance, that what is post-colonialism and what are the historical significance and what is the historical importance of this particular post-colonialism for the third world. Now next is trace the emergence of cultural studies with reference to the theories of Edward Said, Spivak and Bhabha. So here it's basically a lengthy question, because here we have to talk about the cultural studies in relation and in reference to the Holy Trinity, that is referred for Said, Bhabha and Spivak. Now next is, in what ways does postmodernism differ from modernism? So very basic, simple and a straightforward question to attempt. This is also one of the easiest questions if one has to attempt from this particular block. Now next is, critically interpret Edward Said's concept of Orientalism. Mark this question as very important, because you can see this particular question. You may see this particular question in the upcoming examination. It is one of the most important questions. Now discuss Lacan's main contribution to critical theory. So Jacques Lacan and Sigmund Freud theory of psychoanalysis is very, very important and very, very crucial. Now in this particular question we have to state that what is the particular contribution that has been made by Jacques Lacan in critical theory. That is, what is Lacanian school of psychoanalysis. So that is something we need to write in this particular question. Then the next one is, the general characteristics of reading in post-colonial criticism is that a text is read back from the perspective of the colonized. Comment critically on the statement. So this is a question. It's straightforward. It's taken from post-colonialism unit. So we need to justify this particular statement. We need to write the answer with reference to this particular statement. Now next is, discuss critically the seminal issues that post-colonial theory addresses. It is also somewhat the similar question on similar lines. that what are the issues raised by post-colonial theory in particular. Now next is how are lack and desire closely connected in Lacan's theory. So Lacan's concept of the lack and the desire is very important and crucial. So this is also a very important question from examination point of view. So mark this question as important, and we need to talk about his theory and his concept of the desire first, and then how there is a lack in this particular in his particular theory of desire. Now next is evaluate the silent features of post-colonialism. Very simple and straightforward question. Now next is briefly introduce two major post-colonial critics and their contribution to our understanding of literature. So we can write about any of the two major post-colonial critics, and we can also state the significance and their contribution to post-colonial literature in particular. Now next is what is Raymond Williams' contribution to cultural studies. Sometimes this question is also asked even in the December paper, that is we have two sessions, that is June session and December session. So this particular question, that is Raymond Williams' contribution to cultural studies, is mostly seen in the December session examination. So particularly this also becomes important in that context and reference. Now next is what does Spivak mean by subalternity? Explain with examples. So we need to talk about Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak and her concept of subalternity in particular in this particular question. Now next is what are the major concerns of post-colonial theorists. So here we have to talk about the issues and the concerns that are raised by post-colonial theorists in particular. Now next is what is meant by post-modernism, discuss with reference to Lyot. So this is of lately this question has been asked in our previous year question paper. So this question is divided into two parts. That is, firstly we have to state that what is the meaning of postmodernism, and then we have to discuss this particular concept of postmodernism with reference to Lyot. Now last but not the least is the final question of this particular video, that is regarding Foucault. That is, what are Foucault's views on discourse and power? Explain. So this is also an important question from this particular block, that is block number 8. So that was about MEG 05, that all these questions that I have discussed with you, I have stated in this particular video. I hope that all these questions are helpful. You can take a look, you can check out all the questions. And please do like, share and subscribe to this channel. Please keep supporting, stay tuned to this particular channel, and all the best to you, and thanks for watching this video.